This video is going to focus on the classroom brain model, specifically the portions of the diencephalon and the brainstem. In review, the brain is broken down into 4 different components. The biggest component is the cerebrum, which is comprised of the 4 lobes that we discussed: the frontal lobe, the temporal lobe, the occipital lobe, and the parietal lobe. The second portion of the brain is the cerebellum. The third portion is the brainstem, with the fourth being the diencephalon. In order to see the diencephalon better, we're going to need to remove it from the cerebral cortex. And in putting the 2 portions together, I use the analogy of this looking like an ice cream cone, where the ice cream cone itself would be the brainstem, and then the 2 globs of ice cream would then be the diencephalon. The portion of the diencephalon that is the most pronounced would be the thalamus, and that would be this entire portion here. By the way, there is a 5th lobe of the cerebrum, and it's called the insular lobe, and that would actually be this portion right here. So the insular lobe, or the insula, sounds funny, but it is actually a 5th lobe. Looking at a mid-sagittal view of the brainstem, and you know that these are mirror images of each other, but I will look at the left side. This portion here, this peach portion that is surrounded by the white, this is the connection between the right and left thalamus, which is the interthalamic adhesion. That just gives you perspective as to that this portion immediately surrounding it would be the medial portion of the thalamus, which we said was this entire bulbous portion laterally. From the thalamus, if we move anteriorly, we get this kind of bird beak looking type of groove here. That's going to be all the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is the head honcho of the endocrine system, which is your hormones. Caudally or posteriorly, we've got this portion, kind of comes to a point. That is the epithalamus. And the epithalamus has a projection in particular here, posteriorly, called the pineal gland or pineal body. This structure is going to make melatonin, and melatonin is what's supposed to help you with your sleep cycle. There is technically here, this little portion down here is the subthalamus. I will not hold you responsible for identifying this portion. I am mostly interested with the epithalamus, with the pineal body in particular, and then the hypothalamus anteriorly, with the thalamus being the main portion in the core of the diencephalon. Looking at the brainstem itself, it is broken up into 3 portions, and you can see that there is this superior third that is kind of slender. Then you've got this middle portion, which is fatter, and then you've got inferiorly to this indentation would then be the 3rd most inferior portion. You've got the midbrain as the top third, the pons is the middle third, and then the medulla oblongata being the most inferior, with the little portion of spinal cord at the bottom. Looking anteriorly, and putting my 2 pieces together again, we've got the midbrain, the pons, and the medulla oblongata, where you see this yellow most inferiorly. That would be your starting point of the spinal cord. There is another video that goes through the 12 cranial nerves, and that's what these yellows are. The midbrain is the one portion of the brainstem that we actually get a little bit more specific with. And so when you look at the midbrain up close, you can see these vertical striations. These striations are actually tracks of neuron axons that go up from the spinal cord to the cerebrum. And we call these the cerebral peduncles. So if I say identify this, be specific, I mean that the anterior portion of the midbrain is the cerebral peduncles, and you should tell me cerebral peduncles of the midbrain. Turning the brainstem posteriorly, you're going to see some round projections. This one, cut in half, is that pineal body of the epithalamus. Inferior to the pineal body, you're going to see 1, 2, 3, 4 round structures. These structures are called colliculi. The superior colliculi, the top two, are actually important for visual reflexes. So visual information is going to go there. The inferior colliculi are going to be for auditory reflexes. What's nice about these being so close together is that when you hear a sound, your eyes track to figure out where the sound came from, and vice versa. If you see something making a noise, people talking, your ears then become more acute to what that conversation is over there in that part of the room. So the colliculi, these are more specifically what we call the posterior side of the midbrain. On the pons, you're going to see this indentation here. This is going to be a space that is found between the midbrain, or excuse me, between the pons and the cerebellum. And the cerebellum is going to fit just like this, and there's going to be a gap between them. And those spaces have names, and we'll talk about that in another video. What I want you to recognize is that on the pons, move my hands out of the way, on the pons, you've got this very smooth cut markation. And this mark here is showing you where the cerebellum should connect. And what we call this area is the cerebellar peduncles. This is how the brainstem and the cerebellum communicate with each other. And this would also be how then the cerebellum communicates with the cerebrum and the spinal cord. And so these are very important connections. That should do it for the brainstem and diencephalon. Thank you for watching, and I hope it was helpful.